Well, it's October the 2nd already, and I guess the big news today is that in spite of Joe Biden's last-minute appearance at the House, they've not been able to pass the bipartisan infrastructure bill because the progressives are totally holding out for their giant what do you call it? A social programs bill, let's call it. And the thing is that they're supposedly unwilling to just take it as it is and take the 1.2 trillion infrastructure bill and then work on the other bill later. They're still trying to hold that hostage to the other package, which is really a whole bunch of social programs. Okay. And apparently Biden is now talking reducing it to $2 trillion. Now I know that supposedly Manchin has used the 1.5 trillion number, and we don't know whether I've seen some discussion. He was kind of inching up maybe, but I haven't seen it from him personally. So maybe that was a counteroffer. I'm not sure where the $2 trillion comes from exactly. And then there's all a question of how solid those numbers are anyhow, because apparently there's a lot of gimmicks in the budgetary process so that they're basically not being fully honest about what it's going to cost. And having a career in cost estimation, I can assure you that anybody that tries to do bottom-up type estimating, where you're simply adding up all the elements, generally underestimates because you forget some of the elements and underestimate the cost of others. So anyhow, this is I guess it's good news for today, and that we've held it off for another week. And however, Biden assures us that he's not going away. And so what kind of is holding this thing down, I think, at the moment is partly also the fact that his popularity has dropped to around 42 using the Rasmussen poll as a metric, which is, I think, one of the better ones out there that's available on a pretty much a daily basis to track what's happening. And that's way down from somewhere around 50 to 52%, which was earlier in the spring. So that probably is leaving some Democrats in swing districts to be very nervous. By the way, I encourage everybody that sees these things who happens to be represented by a Democrat in a swing district, I wish more people were seeing this, but at any rate, to call or email their representative and let them know how much they're against this giant $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill, and that's and hopefully we can kill both of these things maybe. However, I have a few caveats which I'll get into a little later in this video. By the way, if you like these videos, please subscribe if you haven't already. Give me a like, which helps out with the algorithm to get this out to people, and and leave any comments, disagreements here. One thing. I'm still a little bit questioning whether or not the Republican strategy on this of no is the best strategy. First of all, right now, as I understand, a lot of the road work that's generally funded by the infrastructure bill is now ceased because they put the highway bill, which is a regular ongoing thing for many decades, right? That has been put into this big $1.2 trillion bill that's being held up. Now, I mean, there's several scenarios. Best case scenario, I guess, in one way would be that the whole thing just dies, right? That would really bring some degree, a modest degree of fiscal responsibility back to the government, okay? But the question you have to ask yourself is that really realistic? See, to me, I think to some degree the Republicans are making a mistake. Now, this is not going to be popular, but hear me out here for a second. There's a lot of Democrats that really don't like the giant spending bill that much. And what I'm thinking is, if we were to simply give them the votes in the House and pass this 1.2 trillion bill and get it done, then a lot of the pressure would be off to do anything more. I mean, sure, the progressives are going to be pushing for it, but I think you might have more defections among the moderates and the Democrat side if you would if you would do that. You see, because in other words, right now, there are people who really want what's in the 1.2 trillion bill. Even, about 19 Republican senators wanted it, okay? So you know a lot of moderate Democrats are going to want it too. It's kind of a moderates type bill, okay? But the extremists that want to transform the country want the other big bill. And they're holding the moderates package, which is more reasonable. Some of the stuff even I would support. Not all of it, but some of it. And the problem is with Congress, you don't get just what you want. You typically get what you want plus what somebody else wants, right? And so the question is, if we pass the debt limit like it was offered and passed this 1.2 trillion bill, brought enough Republican votes in that it would have passed, overwhelmed the extreme Democrats, maybe the other stuff would kind of fade and go away. Whereas conservative commentators have tended to see them linked in a way in which if you let the more reasonable stuff go through, the really bad stuff comes with it. But the Democrats are the ones that really want that. I think we're playing into their hands. That's just my opinion. At least I'm tending to think that way. If we actually succeed in killing the whole thing, then I would say that the resistance approach has been correct. But remember, we're playing around with the actual faith and full credit of the U.S. dollar at the same time we're doing all the rest of this stuff. So at any rate, I have no choice of what's going on. I would say, though, that we need to, Manchin is holding out for now, but the question is he weakening? I mean, that is a good question. The other question, is it really just Manchin and Sinema, or is it Manchin, Sinema, and a few other people who choose not to get trashed? I mean, Manchin and Sinema have a political strategy, as I pointed out before, in being deviant from the caucus. Manchin, because he's in a Republican state, and in fact could really do himself some good just by switching to being a Republican. And Sinema, who's playing the Democrat analog to John McCain in Arizona, the moderate that crosses the aisle. Okay. Oh, he's just crossing the aisle in another direction a little bit. However, she's a pretty liberal lady, really. And in fact, I think there's differences even between Sinema and Manchin on the global warming climate stuff. So you see what I'm getting at here. But on the other hand, maybe Tester would agree more with Manchin on that issue. Okay, there's complexities. Anyway, so that's kind of give you a heads up. But however, there's no assurance that by the time most of you would see this, that we'll see it, that it won't, the things, excuse me, won't have changed dramatically. And so, at any rate, that's just kind of where we are on that. The other thing I'd like to mention here is about these videos. I don't know if anybody gets to this point, but okay, it's important kind of that people watch these things a little further in here, because I'm going to be starting to put more and more stuff, potentially controversial stuff that you might get in trouble on YouTube for later in the video. I can't put it in the title or the description because their computer will immediately read that stuff, you see. but like the other day I did one on how to think of COVID vaccine effectiveness. And they flagged the thing saying, well, you got to listen to the CDC on this. And in fact, I don't think I was saying anything that the CDC would really disagree with. It's just something they haven't taken the trouble to try to explain to people. And so similarly, that's something that's going to be, I'm going to try to start, seeding a few things like that over time in here and see what we can do. But I have a friend that put a bunch of things all out, whatever he thought, on Facebook and got kicked off of Facebook. So you got to be a little careful with this subject. And I'll probably on Gab and Parler, I'll be a little bit more, maybe a little more explicit on some of the things that are in here. Certainly not on Twitter, right? And that's just the way it's got to be. But so anyhow, the one thing I would mention here, which isn't maybe that controversial, but we have to think about here about the debt limit and all this sort of thing, and also the danger that's posed by this massive Democrat spending bill. They've got a substantial amount of tax increases in that bill, but they're not adequate to pay for the programs that they're actually proposing to put in there. And that's where those, when they talk about the budget tricks, it's not, and even then, the taxes probably won't raise what they claim they'll raise, because people will try to find ways to get around it, and especially smart businesses with smart lawyers and attorneys and accountants will figure out ways. And I mean, already they're talking about trying to raise capital gains rates. Now, probably the first year it will work pretty good because people already have their capital gains and they get trapped. Don't, you know what I'm saying? Right now, people are probably waiting around deciding, do I sell now or not? Maybe the whole thing doesn't happen. Maybe it doesn't pass. But they get into it next year and say it does pass, they're stuck. They're going to have to pay the taxes. So initially, it probably raises a bunch of money in the first year or so. But then the strategies change in the out years, and all of a sudden, it doesn't raise as much money as it was projected to. And this is a 10-year program they're talking about in the budget bills, see? And so eventually, other taxes will have to be raised. And already I hear that the thing includes stuff like increased taxes on natural gas. And I don't know about heating oil, but I wouldn't be surprised. I've heard natural gas, which will maybe raise your heating bills up by 15%. This stuff about the middle class not being taxed is nonsense. Another thing to consider here very carefully is that the companies that end up paying more taxes trying to maintain their net profit margin, which is a key thing that Wall Street looks at, are going to try to find ways of doing that. And to the degree possible, they're going to try to raise prices in order that they still net out about the same amount of money. Now, because of competition, to some degree, in some places, they won't be able to. But every place else where they can, they will, and that's going to increase your cost of living. And that's one reason why it will be inflationary. The other reason is all the spending will increase more demand for products which are already in short supply. There's supply chain problems. But there's something like I heard 66 ships backed off the California coast that can't unload their cargo right now, or something like that. So this is going to lead to more inflation and more costs. So, and this is a very irresponsible set of government programs that Biden is putting out here. But the point is that, this is one of the big reasons why we're opposing all this stuff. And in the long run, it's going to hurt the country. The other thing is we get more and more into deficit spending, and we had too much deficit spending with the Republicans. Now we're having even more with the Democrats. And eventually, there is a risk that, as the government prints more money, we could get into that. I don't want to take the time here. I'll shorten this up a bit. That eventually the U.S. dollar may no longer be the world reserve currency. When that happens, all of our imports are going to start costing a lot more, and our standard of living will start plunging. So, at any rate, and anything involving resources that we bring in will cost more. Meanwhile, Biden and his genius has decided to cut back on domestic oil production, relying more on OPEC. Another crazy move. Well, at any rate, I'm going to close this up. By the way, you can follow me more, on social media, which are in the links below. Not links, but I give you the addresses below on the various Twitter and Gab and Parler. And until next time, I'll wrap this up for now.